result of the letters that he's sent and others have messages, the contacts that have happened between the secretary and the Iranian foreign minister, the Nowruz messages, these negotiations, which have a benefit for Iran in terms of sanctions relief if they comply. I mean, is Iran unclenching its fist? Does the administration believe that? Is it doing it slowly, one finger at a time, maybe?
I just don't think we're going to do it now.
Starting in the middle. You got to love Matt Lee of the Associated Press. Joining us now, chuckling away, is Frank Gaffney, founder and president of the Center for Security Policy and the host of Secure Freedom Radio. Frank, always good to talk to you. Let's actually start with that. You know, I mean, one finger at a time. They're doing it with both hands and maybe their middle toes, too. Again, the Ayatollah of Iran today saying that Obama is a liar. I mean, I don't even see how this so-called framework of a deal could survive.
Well, let's start with the fact that there really is no deal. The framework is, at best, imagination of the administration and, to varying degrees, some of its fellow negotiating partners. But it's clearly not the kind of imagined framework that the Iranians have in mind. And I just have to say, you know, even before we got to this very appalling point where we're having every statement and the fact sheet essentially that the State Department produced to explain what was in this framework agreement, putatively, is being challenged, contradicted, and dismissed by the principal other negotiating partner. But before we got to that, Steve, we had so many other warnings that things were not going well. We had the Grand Ayatollah, the supreme leader, joining in and leading chants of death to America. We had, as Bibi Netanyahu pointed out, simulated attacks on our aircraft carriers. We've had, of course, Iranian proxies overrunning neighboring states, including Yemen, strategically positioned Yemen, and on and on. And the trouble is that when you add on top of it what I consider to be national security fraud, in terms of the representations being made to the American people about this so-called framework agreement, I think it really constitutes malfeasance on the part of the Obama administration. I don't know how else to characterize it.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more. And, you know, Harf went on to say in that same press conference that, you know, none of these other issues, although they're a great concern, including our hostages, which she actually mentioned, none of that is addressed in the deal. And that is really sad to hear. Let's move on. Something's going to be going on Monday and maybe I think Tuesday as well on Capitol Hill. It's basically Muslim Day, and you're going to have people lobbying Congress. What's going on there?
Well, this is a phenomenon that we've become accustomed to more in state capitals, I think, to date than in the national capital. But it's clearly an exercise in muscle flexing by groups that have, to varying degrees, associations with the Muslim Brotherhood, an organization that, as you know, Steve, and I'm sure your audience does too, the federal government has demonstrated in a federal court proceeding has as its mission destroying Western civilization from within by our hands, the hands of the infidels. What I'm really troubled by is not so much that this is happening, but the auspices under which it's happening. There's a new organization called the U.S. Council of Muslim Organizations, which has said explicitly its objective is to create a political party. And the object of it is basically to try to either induce or coerce or intimidate politicians of other stripes into conforming to the dictates of, frankly, the Muslim Brotherhood. And this is so insidious and so at odds with true democracy, because as we know from the activities of the Brotherhood and its friends like Recep Tayyip Erdogan of Turkey, notably, elsewhere around the world, these guys have no use for democracy other than as a means to obtain power. And then once they've got it, forget about it.
So they're going to have access. They're going to, you know, go meet with various members of Congress throughout the day on Monday?
Monday and Tuesday, I understand. They're going to have a Palestine Day on Tuesday. But yes, the object is
What's
going
that
to be,
all about? What's a Palestine Day?
well, I assume it's to get the United States to do what it sure seems the Obama administration is inclined to do, namely to recognize a state of Palestine, or at least the UN do that, over the prostrate body of the Israelis. It's the kind of betrayal of our ally and the kind of action at odds totally with our interests that really is of a piece with what we were just talking about in Iran, and what's being done now with Cuba, and what's been done with Russia and China, and on and on. And I'm afraid it's not just that the president's intent on fundamentally transforming the United States of America. He's intent on fundamentally transforming the world in ways that will make it vastly more dangerous for all of us.
Absolutely. All right, let's talk about Hillary. And Huma Abedin, how do you think they would fall in on this? Of course, she's announcing Sunday on this Muslim day and on Tuesday, Monday and Tuesday.
Well, I imagine that's a coincidence, but Hillary Clinton, of course, is a woman who, during her tenure, initially as First Lady of the United States, and then as a candidate for the Senate, and then as a Senate member of the Senate, then as a candidate for the presidency, and then as the Secretary of State, had at her right hand throughout a woman that has now been very clearly identified as another of these individuals associated with the Muslim Brotherhood. In fact, Huma Abedin's family was put into the Muslim Brotherhood business by a fellow that's been identified not only as a top brother, but as an Al-Qaeda financier by the name of Nassif. And the trouble is that I think there's been no accountability for this at all. And I hope that in the course of her campaign for the presidency, there will be an opportunity to understand not only what Huma Abedin was doing in the past, for example, around the events of Benghazi and efforts to get Hillary Clinton through something she called the Istanbul process to help impose what amount to Sharia blasphemy laws here in the United States. You remember, talked about naming and shaming and peer pressure to get people not to give offense to Muslims. But we also need to know what Huma would be doing in the future in a Hillary Clinton administration.
Absolutely. Frank, great piece, great segment, chock full of information, and all of it needs to raise our collective eyebrows. Always great to talk to you, sir.
Thank you. My pleasure.
All right, folks,
Take
we're
care,
coming
Steve.
back with more of the Malzberg Show. Don't go away.